Welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today we carry on with our look at U.S. pop culture in the year 1965. We're up to the second quarter, the months of April, May, and June. And once again, we'll take it in two parts. This time we'll talk about music. Next time we'll talk about movies, news, television, and what the Beach Boys were up to. Before we get started on the second quarter, we need to back up to music in the first quarter of 65 for just a minute. In episode 257, U.S. Pop Culture 1965 Part 1, I said that All Day and All of the Night was the Kinks' first U.S. hit. I don't know where that came from. Of course, their first U.S. hit was You Really Got Me, which went to number 7 for 3 weeks beginning November 28, 1964. It's a song I know well, and it was covered among late 1964 hits in episode 213, U.S. Pop Culture 1964 Part 7. How I happened to overlook it when I was putting together episode 257 is a mystery to me. Anyway, sorry for such an obvious error, and I wanted to thank Beanie and Dr. Insomnia for being the first to mention it, and among many, I'm sure, who noticed it. Now let's get to the second quarter with the first album chart, April 3rd, 1965. The soundtrack for Goldfinger is in the last of 3 weeks at number 1. At number 2 is the soundtrack for Disney's Mary Poppins. It had been in the top 10 since the middle of December 1964. Next week, it will begin a 13-week run at number 1. At number 3 is Beatles 65. It had hit number 1 back on January 9th and had stayed at number 1 for 9 weeks. In the second of 3 weeks at its number 4 peak is Nat King Cole's L.O.V.E. In the wake of Cole's passing in February, a number of his earlier albums re-entered the charts. His 1962 album Ramblin' Rose, which originally charted at number 3, will re-chart at number 14 on April 17th. Where Did Our Love Go by the Supremes is at number 5. Still in the top 10, in fact, still at number 5 from the beginning of the year. Bert Kaempfert and his orchestra's Midnight Blue is at number 6. It'll reach number 5 on April 17th. The My Fair Lady soundtrack is at number 7. It had been in the top 10 since December 5th, 1964. It's holding steady now with all the Oscar buzz that's surrounding the movie. At the Academy Awards ceremony held on April 5th, it'll win Best Actor for Rex Harrison, Best Director for George Cukor, and Best Picture of 1964. At number 8 is You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' by the Righteous Brothers. As discussed, it had spent 4 weeks at number 4 beginning February 27th. On top of having spent the last 4 weeks of 1964 at number 1, Beach Boys Concert is having a long run near the top of the chart. It's now at number 9. And at number 10 is My Love, Forgive Me by Robert Goulet. His late 1964 album had gone to number 5 for 2 weeks beginning February 27th. And in top 10 singles on April 3rd, Stop in the Name of Love is the Supremes' 4th consecutive number 1 single. It's in the second of 2 weeks at the top spot. Can't You Hear My Heartbeat by Herman's Hermits is in the second of 2 weeks at number 2. I'm Telling You Now by Freddie and the Dreamers is at number 3. It'll go to number 1 for 2 weeks beginning next week, April 10th. Shotgun by Junior Walker and the All-Stars is in the first of 2 weeks at its number 4 peak. The Birds and the Bees by Jewel Akins is at number 5. It had spent the prior 2 weeks at number 3. At number 6 is King of the Road by Roger Miller. It had gone to number 4 on March 20th. The Beatles' 8 Days a Week is at number 7. It had been number 1 for 2 weeks beginning March 13th. Shirley Bassey's theme for the film Goldfinger is in the second of 2 weeks at its number 8 peak. It's the song that reminds us Goldfinger is the man with the Midas touch, a spider's touch, and that he loves only gold. Only gold. He loves gold. Nowhere to Run by Martha and the Vandellas is at number 9. It'll spend 2 weeks at number 8 beginning next week. And Red Roses for a Blue Lady by Vic Dana is in the first of 2 weeks at number 10. Top 10 singles that will come and go in the second quarter include Go Now by the Moody Blues, another new English group on the U.S. chart. It'll reach number 10 on April 17th. Game of Love by Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders will hit number 1 on April 24th. Tired of Waiting for You, a third U.S. hit for the Kinks, will spend 2 weeks at number 6 beginning April 24th. Shirley Ellis is already following up her hit The Name Game with the Clapping Song, which will go to number 8 on April 24th. Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter by Herman's Hermits will be their first U.S. number 1. It'll top the chart for 3 weeks beginning May 1st. Herman's Hermits will perform it on their American television debut on the June 6th episode of The Ed Sullivan Show amidst screams from girls in the studio audience. Of course, most of the screams are for lead singer Peter Noone, who Sullivan seems to have introduced as Peter Herman Moon. Trying to appear as cuddly and cute as possible, Noone mugs and pops his eyes open in a way we won't see again until Zooey Deschanel. Herman and the Hermits also really lean into their Englishness with exaggerated accents that make you think any minute they'll say, "Blimey, governor, fancy a spot of tea?" As you'd expect, their audience skews younger than most of the other British invasion groups. On tonight's show, they'll also perform Sam Cooke's Wonderful World and a new single, I'm Henry VIII, I Am. I Know a Place will be another big hit for Petula Clark. It'll reach number 3 on May 1st. The Last Time by the Rolling Stones will go to number 9 for 2 weeks beginning May 1st during the Stones' third North American tour, which begins on April 23rd in Montreal and will end in New York City on May 30th. The Stones will promote the single with an appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show on May 2nd, where they'll also perform Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, Little Red Rooster, and, unusual for The Sullivan Show, instead of the usual closing, the Stones will play their instrumental 2120 South Michigan Avenue over the closing credits. The Stones also promote The Last Time on syndicated music shows Hollywood A Go-Go in late May and Shivaree in early June. On May 26th, the Stones appear on Shindig, performing The Last Time, Little Red Rooster, Down the Road a Piece, and a brand new song, Satisfaction, which has not yet been released. And there's another big hit for Gary Lewis and the Playboys. Count Me In will spend 2 weeks at number 2, beginning May 8th. Cast Your Fate to the Wind by Sounds Orchestral, a cover of Vince Guaraldi's number 22 hit from 1963, will reach number 10 on May 8th. I'll Never Find Another You by The Seekers will hit number 4 on May 15th. Silhouettes, a cover of the Rays' number 3 hit from 1957, and another hit for the Red Hot Herman's Hermits, will go to number 5 on May 15th. I'll Be Doggone is a second top 10 hit in 1965 for Marvin Gaye. It'll go to number 8 on May 15th. The Beatles' new single, Ticket to Ride, will go to number 1, naturally, on May 22nd. And another hit for the Righteous Brothers, Just Once in My Life, will go to number 9 for 2 weeks beginning May 22nd. The Beach Boys' second number 1 single, Help Me Rhonda, will follow Ticket to Ride at number 1 on May 29th and stay there for 2 weeks. Of course, we covered it in detail last time. It's not unusual. The first U.S. hit for Welsh singer Tom Jones will spend 2 weeks at number 10 beginning May 29th. Just a Little, the first, and as it will turn out only top 10 hit for San Francisco's Beau Brummels, will go to number 8 on June 5th. Back in My Arms Again by the Supremes will top the chart on June 12th, making it their 5th consecutive number 1 single. Engine Engine number 9 by Roger Miller will go to number 7 on June 12th. And Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, the title song from the new Bette Davis thriller, sung by Patti Page, will peak at number 8 on June 26th. A huge hitmaker from the late 40s to the mid-50s, this is Patti Page's first time in the top 10 since 1958, and as it will turn out, it'll be her last time in the top 40. In notable new album releases in the second quarter, in April comes Whipped Cream and Other Delights by Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. It'll slowly rise to the top of the charts over the course of the year, helped, no doubt, by its memorable cover art. Of course, album covers will become an art form in themselves in the 60s, and this is an early indication of just how iconic an album cover can be. Released on May 3rd is Barbra Streisand's new album, My Name is Barbara. It's also the title of her first television special, which aired to excellent reviews and high ratings on CBS 5 days earlier on April 28th. Also released in May, Today My Way by Nancy Wilson, which will hit number 7 on July 31st. Just Once in My Life, a quick new album from the Red Hot Righteous Brothers. It'll spend the last 3 weeks of August at number 9. The Nearness of You by John Gary, which will go to number 11 on September 25th. and Mary Ann Faithfull's self-titled album, which will reach number 12 on September 25th. Released on June 14th is Beatles 6. As discussed earlier, Capitol had held back 6 tracks from the late '64 UK release Beatles for Sale. Undoubtedly, they figured there would be sufficient new Beatles music early in 1965 to put together a new US album by the spring. Instead, after a minor drop in quality from rushing to complete Beatles for Sale, the Beatles slowed their output to make sure their next releases were up to their standards. In the first half of 1965, there was 1 single, and the A-side was going to be featured in their next movie, so Capitol was obliged to hold that back for the album of the film. By the spring, those unreleased in the US tracks were burning a hole in Capitol's proverbial pocket. The Beatles attempted to placate them by advancing 2 non-movie tracks already recorded for their next album. It still wasn't enough for a new US album, so on May 10th, at Capitol's insistence, the Beatles held what was described as a special recording session for the North American market. They recorded 2 Larry Williams songs, Dizzy Miss Lizzie and Bad Boy, both with John on lead vocal. The recordings were sent to Capitol by air freight the next day for immediate release on a new US Beatles album. Capitol took those recordings, the 2 advanced tracks, You Like Me Too Much and Tell Me What You See, the B-side, Yes It Is, and the 6 remaining Beatles for Sale tracks and put together Beatles 6. If you're counting, that still gave Capitol only 11 tracks rather than their usual 12. I'm sure at this point, Capitol figured that was close enough, and as we'll see, not surprisingly, it won't hinder the album from shooting to number 1. On June 21st comes another of the year's landmark albums, Mr. Tambourine Man. The Byrds' first album is a groundbreaking, trend-setting mix of folk and rock produced by Terry Melcher. It'll spend the first 2 weeks of August at number 6 and will turn out to be their highest-charting original album. Released on June 28th is Having a Wild Weekend by the Dave Clark 5. It features 4 songs from their movie. Having a Wild Weekend is the US title. In the UK, the movie is called Catch Us If You Can, which I think is a much better title. The album will reach number 15 on October 16th. Also released in June, Herman's Hermits on Tour. Despite the title, it's not live. It's their second US studio album. And in June, Frank Sinatra's Sinatra 65, which will reach number 9 on September 11th. In music-related news, on April 14th, it's reported that the title of the upcoming Beatles movie has been changed from 8 Arms to Hold You to Help. And that'll do it for this week. I hope you'll join me next week when we wrap up the second quarter of 1965 with movies, news, television, and the Beach Boys. Meanwhile, I look forward to your comments and feedback. Please hit like if you don't mind, subscribe if you haven't. Have a great week. Thanks for watching. Bye.